Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now, today's video, I'm going to be finally reviewing, I feel like I put this one off for a while, the Mazda Roadster NR-A. Obviously the new, I guess, variant of the Mazda Roadster, which we currently have had in Gran Turismo 7 since release, and probably one of the more controversial cars added to the game in terms of post-launch content. It seems like this car is just getting widespread ripped apart no matter where you look. So let's get into it. So the Roadster NR-A ND22, as you can see, it is the literal same model as the Roadster S we have, just with a few extras, and it's pretty much essentially a cup car for the road. In terms of price point, 31,000 credits. It's a tiny bit more expensive than the standard version, which is, kind of expected with the extras that this car comes with in real life. But again, pretty cheap, and at least you can possibly even get one after your daily roulette ticket spin. So let's get into the review, and if you've never been here for a review, this is how it works. Essentially, we get the car straight out of the box, we don't tune it, we don't add anything to it, and we take it for a hot lap around the Nürburgring Nordschleife layout, just to see where it ranks among, its category or overall times. It totally depends. If it gets in the top 20, obviously this car here will not be going for an overall time, and it is actually very unique in the fact it sits as the first car that's within the 400 pp category of our lap time. So as expected, this thing isn't going to be battling for the fastest lap at all. In fact, nowhere near, but we'll get into that. Then after that, we will fully upgrade it as much as possible with all the top parts on and take it around the high speed ring for our modified challenge, hot lap, whatever you want to call it, and then we'll see where it ranks over there. This is where a lot of the slower cars in the game seem to really come out of the shell. Fully upgraded, you can get some really surprising results, so it'll be interesting to see where this will rank in the end. But onto the car itself. So like I said at the beginning, this seems to be a car which is, I guess, universally being ripped apart in terms of the post-launch content. Now, a lot of cars do kind of get this treatment. Obviously, there is a bunch of cars certain people are going to want in the game. If they don't get them, they seem to just go on the attack at anything that Polyphony offers. But this is a strange one, and I kind of feel why people are doing so. So we already have the Roadster S in the game. You can very much make it look exactly the same as this, the NR-A. Obviously, this is pretty much a road-going version of the Cup car, so it does look a little bit more sporty, obviously, with the roll cages standard, all that good stuff. It just has a bit more of an aggressive look. Compared to the standard, at least anyway. But again, at first glance and just looking at it from certain angles, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference if that roll cage wasn't in there. And I can see why a lot of people are kind of like, okay, we had 4 cars with the update, but essentially that's just one car that we've already got in the game, and you can make the standard Roadster S version basically look the exact same, with just adding a roll cage and some different wheels. So yeah, I can understand the controversy and that the hate this car gets. But for me personally, I like to try and find joy in pretty much anything in this game, and one big thing for me as to why I didn't really jump on the bandwagon and say this is an awful release is because this is actually helping me personally. Now, this is a personal one, so it's probably the only saving grace for this car in terms of an excuse for it being added. But essentially, obviously, I run my own racing league, and one of the cups that we have is the Roadster Cup. So to have the proper, more sportier version of this car, meaning that we have to do less modifications and such, really does improve the experience. And I'll kind of get into why, this is a much better version than the standard Roadster, which we have been running for a couple of rounds. So I do have sort of some sort of comparison to make. I will actually do a full comparison between the standard and the modified versions of the S and the NR-A, but I will save that for a different video. But in terms of kind of comparing it to how we had our sort of cup car set up using the standard model, and this one, which is essentially in the game as a road legal cup car, obviously the power and stuff isn't amazing in that. It really does feel much better, and kind of what I wanted the original Roadsters to feel like. So personally, that's probably the only reason, I turned around and said, it's not really a bit of lazy kind of an addition to the game, but Then I kind of, kept thinking a bit more, and I saw that we got the Mazda variants of certain cars. I believe there was this one, the RX-7 GT3 concept, and the Group 4 Tenza, which all kind of got variants for this Japan-only Gran Turismo championship thing that they're running. Which is pretty cool that everyone got them, and I feel like maybe that's why we got this as kind of like a bonus fourth car, to kind of celebrate that, or kind of I guess build up a bit of attention to that. So that kind of makes sense there. So maybe that's kind of why this came in, and we got the 4 cars instead of the standard 3. Because probably Gran Turismo and Polyphony or whatever will go back to the 3 cars per update next time around. Then it kind of makes more sense as to why we just sort of got a different version of a car that's already in the game. But let's not take away from the car itself. Let's just review it for what it is, and in my opinion, how it felt doing the hot lap. So I'll talk about the standard version, which we're on here first. So as soon as I jumped in this car, it felt great, to be honest. As a standard car, there was nothing to really complain about. It's as you expect. It's not going to blow your mind. It's not really going to impress you with its speed or anything like that. It's just a typical Roadster MX-5, whatever you call them. I'm going to refer to it as a Roadster for in-game sake. But yeah, I mean, it felt just fine. Originally, I tried it in Brands Hatch when I was getting the gameplay, and it was okay. It was nothing special. But then going on to the Nürburgring Nordschleife, one thing I felt in the first first half of the track was that it was just, the excitement was not there. I was hitting the corners, I was expecting it to be, low power, but, very sporty and sort of, a ton of fun to drive, like, these cars usually are. That's kind of how they're made to be. And it just really wasn't there. However, whereabouts you are seeing I am on the track currently, this car all of a sudden got a second breath of life. It sort of became what I expected and wanted from this car. It became very kind of aggressive into corners. You felt you could sort of throw it around. Yes, it's not the fastest thing, but I was just finding myself having fun actually driving it. The actual driving experience of this car, getting it sideways, throwing it as hard as you can through the corners, was just unbelievable. It's as if it got to this sort of, I guess, more narrower, really tight section of the track, and all of a sudden became a completely different machine. And that's where I began to feel like, yes, this does feel like a bit more of a sort of stiffer, sportier variant than the standard Roadster which we have in the game, which I've driven constantly since release. I've never been massively blown away with it. It's kind of just as and when car. But this really did mark a point where this began to feel massively different from that standard version. Much stiffer, much more aggressive, much happier to kind of sit sideways, throwing it through the corners a lot harder than you would. The floaty suspension just wasn't there. It felt really kind of planted in terms of throwing it through. I just really felt like this car began to become pretty much amazing at that point, and all them complaints that I had through the first half of the lap just disappeared. Obviously, eventually on the Nordschleife, you do come out of that part of the track and end up on the sort of the big long straight, where again the fun sort of goes away towards the end of the lap. But that second half of the lap really did impress me, and I felt what this car was all about, really, and what it is meant to be. So just a word of warning: if you take this on the bigger, wider tracks, you will probably not feel the joy of driving it. If you are on some tight, twisty track where you can really throw this car into, in its standard form, it will probably become an enjoyable drive, to have. This is what these cars are made for, and I really do feel like that's when they begin to shine. And at first, that first sector of the Nordschleife is quite twisty as well, but there was just something about it through there that just did not feel fun at all. So yeah, I feel like the tighter the tracks you go on, the more twisty, turny sectors that you're smashing through will kind of depend where you get your enjoyment from. You may enjoy it, you may not. But in terms of the overall feel of this car, it really did feel good, and it felt massively different, which is really strange to say for a car which, you know, literally looks the same and should really, you know, you'd kind of expect it to feel the same as well. But no, it genuinely felt like a different machine, and I was more than happy to keep, you know, throwing it about. And it does kind of get me excited, like I said, for my own personal circumstances in terms of, you know, running it in my championship and updating the cars to a proper version, because it really did feel much better, and it means I can just run it in its bog standard form without having to mess around with upgrades and just have as much fun as I really want in a sporty small car. So in terms of the overall time, we did it in 8 minutes 58.794. There are my individual sectors if you want to compare your own. In terms of the lap, there was probably a few sectors where I felt I could have gone a lot quicker, a lot earlier, especially in the first half of the lap. But then obviously I did begin to mess around and start trying to, you know, absolutely throw the back end out and such. But it's not a world beater, it's just under 9 minutes, but it is still not the overall slowest car we've ever ran. Now, like I said, this is a bit of a special one, and a bit of a strange one as well, because this is the first car that jumps into the 400 pp category, so there's nothing to really compare it to. In terms of its overall time, it was a little bit slower than the Pontiac GTO Judge, I believe, but it was still faster than, I think, the Ford... Is it the Ford Roadster or something like that? The 1932 model, which is still the slowest current car which we have driven out and tested within GT7. So I essentially just wanted to turn this car into a full-blown cup car race car. So that's exactly what I did. So say hello to this thing, fully upgraded, absolutely just crazy. Now this, to me, is where this car shined. In terms of, you know, the kind of upgrades and such, there's nothing massively different. But if you want that proper cup car feel, I fully recommend going balls to the wall and upgrading this thing beyond belief, because it's absolutely amazing. Now, like I said, if you compare it to the standard one, there's not much difference, you know, in terms of visual mods and such. But I'm going to review it for what it is, fully upgraded. This thing is the craziest little go-kart I think I've ever tested in GT7. In terms of its handling and its performance, it's near perfect. It's a car which, while fully upgraded, is not insanely powerful. I think it only puts out like 250 brake horsepower, but the grip and the way you can throw this thing through the corners, as you're probably going to see, and the brakes combined, make this the most pleasurable driving experience I think I've had it in a long time. There was just something about this car when I was throwing it around at full pelt that really just, I don't know, sort of blew me away. And again, I feel like if you took this fully upgraded version to a tighter, less speed reliant track than like my test track, the high speed ring, it would really shine, and I feel like it will become one of your personal favorites. I know in terms of just a driving standpoint, it's definitely up there for me, and I'm going to be, you know, running it time after time to just see where it really sticks, because like I said, the driving experience, the grip, the brakes, the way this car kind of handles itself fully upgraded was near perfect. And don't forget, this is without any tuning to it, so for it to come out of the box fully upgraded and not be a sort of ridiculous mess that tries to throw itself into the barrier was a really refreshing change of pace. So massively enjoyed this lap. That is going to be our lap done. So let's find out exactly where this thing ranks. So overall, it ranks 14th out of 16. Now, you have to remember, this thing is just over 250 brakes. In fact, you can see it at the top there, 283 brake horsepower, weighs nothing, it feels like a go-kart, and is mainly focused, I feel, for those shorter, tighter tracks. High speed ring being a, you know, high speed track, it was at a massive disadvantage, and that kind of shows. I feel like this thing, though, is absolutely near perfect. So, is this a worthy addition to Gran Turismo 7? I feel like it's very dependent on kind of how you view this car. If you like that whole cup car vibe it gives off, then yeah, you're very much going to enjoy it. It feels like a better version of a car we already have in the game. But again, that shows the criticism. Yes, this is very much just a variant. Yes, it does kind of feel lazy, but you know, I can understand those criticisms, and I cannot really challenge people on that because, in a way, they are right. But as a car itself, I absolutely love this thing. I feel like the more I drove it, the more it became a proper little, you know, pocket rocket, and that's what I wanted from this car. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you all in the next one. Discord in the description down below, as well as my sponsor for today's video, the Controller People. I'll catch you all later. Take care, guys. Peace.